The first contact. The crystalline spires of the imperial palace pierced the violet skies of Astrea Prime, their surfaces refracting the light of 3 setting suns. Inside the grand combat arena, Princess Thera stood before the Imperial Council, her luminescent scales dulled with exhaustion. The training drone lay in pieces around her, not because she had defeated it, but because her father, Emperor Vexen, had ordered it deactivated in disgust. "My daughter," the Emperor's voice resonated through the chamber, making the quantum blast walls vibrate. "You disappoint me yet again. How can you lead our warriors when you cannot even master basic combat protocols?" Thera's secondary hearts pounded with shame as she rose from the training mat. Despite her species' natural strength and enhanced physiology, she had failed to demonstrate the brutal efficiency expected of an Astrian warrior. The watching council members' bioluminescent patterns pulsed with barely concealed mockery. War Prince Nexus stepped forward, his cybernetically enhanced arm gleaming in the artificial light. "Perhaps, Emperor, it is time to consider alternative succession arrangements. The princess's academic interests seem ill-suited to leadership of our warrior empire." Thera's scales flickered with suppressed anger. True, she spent more time studying xenobiology and comparative combat techniques than practicing traditional Astrian battle forms, but that didn't make her weak. Different, perhaps, but not weak. Emperor Vexen's crystalline crown sparkled as he turned to his chief strategist, Commander Lyrics. "What about these humans we keep hearing about? The ones making waves in the Galactic Combat League. Primitive but surprisingly effective fighters, my Emperor," Lyrics responded, her tactical implant projecting data into the air. "Despite their biological limitations, they've developed numerous combat styles that compensate for their physical weaknesses. Several noble houses have begun employing them as combat instructors." Humans. Thera's scientific curiosity piqued despite her embarrassment. She'd studied Earth's various martial arts in secret, fascinated by how such physically inferior beings had developed so many effective fighting techniques. "Yes, humans," her father's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Since you cannot learn proper combat from the Empire's finest instructors, perhaps a primitive creature can succeed where they have failed." He waved his hand dismissively. "Commander, acquire the most capable human combat specialist available. Let us see if they can salvage this situation." 2 stellar cycles later, Thera stood in the palace's atmospheric adjustment chamber, watching her new instructor undergo decontamination. The human floated in the purification field, looking remarkably calm for someone who had just been purchased and transported across half the galaxy. Kai Morgan stepped out of the chamber with unexpected grace, dark eyes taking in the assembled Astrian officials with analytical precision. Unlike most humans brought before the council, this one showed no sign of fear or awe. "Welcome to Astrea Prime," Commander Lyrics announced through the universal translator. "You have been selected to train the princess." "Yes," Kai interrupted, stretching muscles clearly strained by Astrea's higher gravity. "Though I usually prefer my students to hire me voluntarily rather than through interstellar kidnapping." Several council members bristled at the human's casual tone, but Thera found herself intrigued. This wasn't the cowering primitive she'd expected. "You dare speak so informally, War Prince Nexus began, but Kai cut him off again. "I dare because you need me," the human stated simply. "Your traditional combat methods aren't working for the princess, or you wouldn't have brought me here. So let's skip the posturing and get to work." Kai turned to Thera, eyes analyzing her stance. "That is, if your highness is willing to learn something new." Thera straightened, meeting the human's gaze. For the first time since her combat training began, someone was asking what she wanted rather than telling her what she should be. "When do we start?" she asked. Kai smiled, a gesture that made several council members step back in alarm. "Right now. First lesson. True strength isn't about having the hardest punch. It's about knowing when and how to use it." As Thera followed her new instructor toward the training areas, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Perhaps this strange human could help her prove that there was more than one way to be strong. Breaking traditions. Again, Kai's voice echoed through the private training arena at the seemingly impossible hour of first moonrise. And this time, stop trying to overpower me. Use my momentum against me. Thera circled her human instructor, frustrated but intrigued. They'd been training for 3 standard cycles, and nothing about Kai's methods matched her previous combat instruction. Where Astrine warriors relied on overwhelming force and cybernetic enhancement, Kai taught fluidity and adaptation. Your species naturally has 3 times human strength. Kai observed, shifting stance with practiced ease. But you fight like you're trying to punch through a battleship. Sometimes the softest touch is the most effective. Thera lunged forward, her enhanced muscles capable of delivering enough force to shatter concrete. Instead of blocking or dodging, Kai moved like water, redirecting her momentum with minimal effort. Before she could adjust, Thera found herself face down on the training mat. "How?" she demanded, pushing herself up. "Your muscles shouldn't be able to function properly under Astrine gravity, let alone throw me." Kai helped her up, smiling. "I didn't throw you. You threw yourself. I just helped you along. That's lesson 1. Your opponent's strength can be their greatest weakness." From the observation deck above, War Prince Nexus watched with barely concealed disgust. His cybernetic eye whirred as it recorded the session, gathering evidence for his next council meeting. Beside him, Commander Lyrics analyzed the training with professional interest. "The human's methods are unorthodox," Lyrics noted, "but the princess shows improvement." "Improvement?" Nexus scoffed. "This is an insult to our combat traditions. The heir to the Astrine Empire, rolling around on the floor like a primitive? The council won't stand for it." Below, Kai was introducing Thera to something called Aikido, the movements flowing like a dance rather than traditional Astrine combat forms. To Nexus's surprise, Thera's natural flexibility and extra joints actually enhanced the earth martial arts' effectiveness. "Your bodies evolved for overwhelming force," Kai explained, demonstrating a joint lock that used an opponent's strength against them. "But that makes you predictable. Every species in the galaxy knows Astrines will hit hard and straight. They don't expect this." Thera practiced the movement, her bioluminescent patterns brightening with excitement as she successfully redirected a training drone's attack. "It's like my xenobiology studies, understanding different species' strengths and adaptations. We're applying the same principle to combat." "Exactly," Kai beamed. "Fighting isn't just about who's strongest. It's about adaptation, creativity, using whatever advantages you have. Watch this." The human demonstrated a series of moves that combined earth martial arts with Astrine flexibility, creating something entirely new. Thera's scientific mind raced with possibilities. "This is how humans survived on Earth," Kai explained between demonstrations. "We weren't the strongest, fastest, or toughest, but we could adapt, learn, combine different approaches. That's real strength." The training sessions fell into a rhythm. Each day, Kai introduced new fighting styles: Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Wing Chun, Muay Thai, and helped Thera adapt them to her Astrine physiology. Her natural abilities, once seen as inadequate by traditional standards, became advantages in these hybrid techniques. But not everyone appreciated their progress. The council chambers buzzed with controversy as War Prince Nexus presented his recordings. "This is an abomination," he declared to the assembled nobles. "Our future emperor, practicing the savage techniques of a lesser species. What next? Shall we abandon our technological superiority and live in caves?" Emperor Vexen watched the recordings with an unreadable expression. "The human was brought here to improve my daughter's combat abilities. Are you suggesting they have failed in this task?" "Success is not the only measure, my emperor," Nexus argued. "Tradition, dignity, the very foundations of our warrior culture are at stake. The princess must lead our armies, not dabble in primitive arts." Meanwhile, Thera and Kai had moved their training to the palace gardens, away from prying eyes. Here, among the crystalline flora, they could experiment more freely. "Your bioluminescence," Kai mused, watching Thera's scales shift colors during a particularly complex movement. "Have you ever considered using it tactically? For combat?" Thera frowned. "It's just a biological function for communication and mood expression." "Exactly. Communication. In a fight, making your opponent hesitate for even a split second can be the difference between victory and defeat. Show me your brightest pattern." Thera's scales erupted in a brilliant display that momentarily dazzled even Kai's dark-adapted eyes. "Perfect. Now we combine that with the spinning kick you've been practicing." The resulting technique was both beautiful and devastatingly effective. Thera's natural bioluminescence, combined with the unexpected movements of Earth martial arts, created moments of disorientation that even cybernetically enhanced opponents would struggle to counter. But their innovation drew unwelcome attention. That evening, as Thera returned to her quarters, she found War Prince Nexus waiting. "Your Highness," he bowed with exaggerated formality. "The Council has concerns about your training methods." "My combat effectiveness has improved significantly," Thera replied coolly. "Isn't that what matters? There are proper ways to achieve improvement, Princess, ways that honor our traditions, our culture. This human pollution of our combat arts cannot continue." "Is that a threat, War Prince?" Nexus's cybernetic eye gleamed. "Merely a reminder of your position, Your Highness. The Astrine Empire wasn't built on alien techniques and primitive philosophies. Perhaps it's time to consider whether someone more traditional should lead our people into the future." As he strode away, Thera's scales flickered with concern. She had known there would be opposition to her training with Kai, but this felt like more than simple disapproval. Something darker was brewing in the palace corridors. That night, during their usual post-training discussion, Thera shared her concerns with Kai. "Political threats," Kai nodded thoughtfully. "Some things are universal, I guess. Time for lesson 2. Sometimes the most important fights happen outside the training arena." "What do you mean?" "I mean," Kai grinned, "it's time to show your council that these primitive techniques can stand up to their precious traditions. How do you feel about entering the upcoming Imperial combat trials?" Thera's scales flashed with surprise and excitement. The combat trials were the Empire's most prestigious tournament, where warriors proved their worth before the entire nobility. No heir had ever entered before their formal confirmation as successor. "They'll say I'm not ready." "Good." Kai's smile turned predatory. "Let them underestimate us. After all, that's exactly what humans have been counting on for millennia." Hidden threats. The Imperial combat trials were 6 weeks away when the first attempt on Thera's life came. A training drone, supposedly programmed for basic sparring, suddenly switched to lethal protocols during a routine session. If not for the reflexes Kai had drilled into her, Thera would have been impaled by the drone's plasma blade. "That wasn't a malfunction," Kai said later, examining the drone's crushed remains. The human's dark eyes narrowed at the exposed circuitry. "These neural protocols have been modified. Someone wanted this to look like an accident." Thera's scales rippled with concern. "War Prince Nexus has been increasingly vocal about his opposition to our training. But sabotage? That's a serious accusation against a member of the Imperial Council." "Politics." Kai spat the word like a curse. "Sane in every species. But this gives us an advantage." "How is someone trying to kill me an advantage?" "Because now we know they're scared." Kai began pacing, a habit Thera had learned meant the human was formulating a strategy. "They wouldn't risk such a direct move unless our training was working better than they expected. Time to accelerate your education, Princess." Over the next few days, Kai introduced Thera to aspects of combat she'd never considered. They practiced in darkness, using her bioluminescence to disorient opponents. They studied the palace's security systems, mapping patrol routes and blind spots. Every meal was tested for toxins, every training area swept for sabotage. On Earth, we call this paranoia, Kai explained, teaching Thera how to detect surveillance devices. In royal courts, we call it survival. The attacks grew more frequent but subtle. Training schedules were altered without authorization. Equipment mysteriously malfunctioned. Even Thera's ceremonial armor showed signs of tampering. During one particularly intense training session, Thera noticed something odd about the way War Prince Nexus moved as he observed from the gallery. Her enhanced vision caught unnatural patterns in his cybernetic enhancements. Kai, she whispered during a water break, something's wrong with Nexus's implants. The energy signatures don't match standard military tech. The human's expression turned serious. You're sure? I've studied every approved cybernetic enhancement in the Empire. His are different, more advanced, but also unstable. That night, they secretly accessed the palace's medical archives. What they found confirmed Thera's suspicions and revealed something far more disturbing. These are prototype combat enhancements, Thera explained, scrolling through encrypted files. Developed by the Science Ministry but deemed too dangerous for implementation. The neural interface risks causing psychological deterioration and eventual psychosis. Let me guess, Kai leaned closer to the holographic display, increased strength and combat effectiveness at the cost of mental stability. Exactly. They were banned after early test subjects became increasingly aggressive and paranoid. But these requisition orders. Thera's scales paled. Nexus hasn't just been enhancing himself. He's been quietly upgrading his most loyal supporters in the military. Building an army, Kai concluded grimly. Classic coup preparation. The assassination attempts on you weren't just about stopping your training. They're clearing the path to the throne. A soft chime interrupted their research, the archive's motion sensors detecting approach. They quickly erased their access logs and slipped out through maintenance corridors Kai had mapped during their security studies. We need proof, Thera said once they were safely back in her private training room. Something we can take to my father and the council. Proof won't be enough, Kai countered. Nexus has too many supporters in position of power. Even with evidence, it would be your word against his. And right now I'm seen as the weak hair corrupted by primitive human influences. Thera finished bitterly. Exactly. We need to play this smart. Kai's expression turned thoughtful. The combat trials. That's our opportunity. Every noble house will be watching. If we can expose Nexus's illegal enhancements during the competition, he'd be forced to defend himself publicly, Thera realized. But the trials are sacred. If we make accusations without absolute proof, then we make sure the proof reveals itself. Kai smiled that predatory smile that Thera had learned meant a particularly clever strategy was forming. Those prototype enhancements you mentioned, they're unstable, right? What happens if they're exposed to certain energy frequencies? Thera's scales brightened as she understood. They'd resonate at visible frequencies, revealing their presence to everyone. But generating that kind of energy field in the arena would be impossible without drawing suspicion. Kai agreed. Unless it came from a competitor's natural bioluminescence, combined with the kinetic energy of combat. Thera finished, her own scales beginning to pulse with excitement. We've been practicing those light-based techniques. Now you're thinking like a human, Kai grinned. Sometimes the best way to spring a trap is to let your opponent think they're the one setting it. They spent the next week modifying their training routine. Every movement, every technique was calibrated to generate specific energy patterns that would interact with the illegal cybernetics. Thera's natural bioluminescence, once seen as a mere biological function, became a key weapon in their strategy. But Nexus wasn't idle. Security footage revealed his supporters taking up key positions throughout the palace. Military units loyal to his faction were quietly transferred closer to the capital. The pressure to stop Thera's training increased, with several council members openly calling for her withdrawal from the trials. They're getting desperate, Kai observed, watching Thera practice a particularly complex sequence of movements. Good. Desperate people make mistakes. And if we're wrong? Thera asked, her scales dimming with concern. If we fail to expose him during the trials, then we'll have given him exactly what he wants, a public opportunity to eliminate you while making it look like a tragic training accident. Kai's expression hardened, which is why we're not going to fail. You're ready for this, Thera. You've combined the best of both our species, Astrian strength with human adaptability. Is that really enough against illegally enhanced warriors and political conspirators? Princess, Kai smiled, if human history has taught us anything, it's that the most dangerous opponent isn't the strongest or most technologically advanced. It's the one willing to change, adapt, and think differently. Now, let's run through that resonance sequence one more time. We've got a coup to prevent. The tournament begins. The Imperial Combat Arena blazed with light from 3 suns, its quantum glass dome refracting rainbow patterns across thousands of assembled spectators. Noble houses from across the Astrian Empire had gathered for the combat trials, their enhanced bodies and ceremonial armor creating a sea of gleaming metal and bioluminescence. In the preparation chamber beneath the arena, Thera adjusted her minimal combat gear, another break from tradition that had caused whispers among the nobility. Where other competitors wore powered armor and visible cybernetic enhancements, she had chosen light, flexible protection that allowed full range of movement. Remember, Kai said, helping her warm up, they're expecting traditional Astrian combat forms. Every technique we've developed is an advantage, but only if you stay focused. Assuming they let you remain as my second. Thera's scales flickered with worry. War Prince Nexus has been pushing to ban non-Astrian participation in the trials. Let him push. Kai's confident smile hadn't wavered. The ancient laws are clear. Each competitor chooses their own support team. Even Nexus can't change tradition without revealing his true motives. The arena's quantum speakers crackled to life, announcing the opening ceremonies. Thera felt her secondary hearts speed up as she took her place in the competitors' procession. Among the 24 warriors entering the arena, she was the only one without visible cybernetic enhancement. Emperor Vexen stood from his crystalline throne, his voice resonating through the stadium. Welcome, noble warriors of Astria, to the 744th Imperial Combat Trials. Today, you prove your worth before the Empire and the ancestors. May your strength bring honor to your houses. Thera caught War Prince Nexus watching her from his position among the elite competitors. His cybernetic eye whirred as it analyzed her stance, probably trying to predict her fighting style. Let him look, she thought. Every scan, every analysis would show him exactly what he expected. A weak princess playing at being a warrior. The first round began with ceremonial duels, supposedly light combat to warm up the competitors and entertain the crowd. Thera's opponent was a young noble from a minor house, his newly installed combat enhancements still showing surgical scars. House Rill stands ready, he announced, activating his powered armor with a theatrical flourish. House Vexen stands ready. Thera replied simply, moving into one of the modified stances Kai had taught her. The starting tone rang out, and her opponent charged with typical Astrian directness. Full power, straight ahead. 3 months ago, Thera would have tried to match his strength, a contest she would have lost despite her royal bloodline. Instead, she moved like water, redirecting his momentum and adding her own force at precisely the right moment. The young noble went flying, his powered armor shorting out as he crashed into the arena wall. The crowd fell silent, then burst into confused murmuring. This wasn't how Astrian combat was supposed to work. Excellent, Kai murmured as Thera returned to the preparation area. They're already off balance. How are your energy levels? Barely elevated, Thera replied, her scales rippling with pleased colors. The efficiency techniques you taught me make a significant difference. Throughout the day, Thera continued to confound expectations, where other competitors relied on brute force and technological advantage. She flowed between forms, combining estrine strength with human adaptability. Each victory added to the growing controversy. "This is an outrage," she overheard one council member complaining. "Using alien techniques in the sacred trials. It's an insult to our traditions." And yet, another responded thoughtfully. "She advances while using minimal energy. Perhaps there is something to these human methods." The quarterfinals brought her face to face with one of Nexus's enhanced supporters, a military commander whose cybernetics hummed with the same unstable energy signature they detected earlier. This would be their first real test of the resonance strategy. "Ready to forfeit, princess," the commander sneered, his enhanced muscles crackling with barely contained power. "Some of us have earned our strength." Thera didn't respond verbally, but her scales began to pulse in the precise patterns she and Kai had practiced. As the duel began, she moved through sequences designed not just for combat effectiveness, but to generate specific energy frequencies. At first, nothing seemed to happen. They exchanged blows, Thera avoiding direct confrontation while maintaining her luminescent display. Then, gradually, the commander's movements became erratic. His cybernetics began to glow with an unnatural light, matching the frequency of Thera's bioluminescence. What are you doing?" He stumbled, his enhanced systems starting to overload. Thera pressed her advantage, using his increasing instability against him. The crowd watched in fascination as the commander's supposedly superior technology began to work against him. Within minutes, he collapsed, his illegal enhancements visibly malfunctioning. Medical drones rushed to stabilize him, but the damage was done. Spectators with enhanced vision had seen the telltale signatures of prohibited technology. Whispers spread through the arena like wildfire. "Did you see? Those weren't standard military enhancements. How did she know?" In the royal box, Emperor Vexen leaned forward, his expression unreadable. War Prince Nexus gripped his seat with his cybernetic hand hard enough to crack the material. "An interesting technique, daughter." Vexen's voice carried clearly in the sudden quiet. "Perhaps you've learned more from your human teacher than we realized." "Thank you, father," Thera bowed, her scales now glowing with calm, controlled patterns. "I look forward to demonstrating more in the semifinals." As she walked back to the preparation area, she caught Nexus' expression, a mixture of rage and calculation that sent a chill through her secondary hearts. They had drawn first blood in this hidden war, exposing one of his enhanced supporters. But now he knew they knew, and the next rounds would be far more dangerous. "He'll have to move soon," Kai said quietly as they reviewed recordings of the match. "We've threatened his plans publicly, even if most people don't realize it yet. He can't risk letting you continue exposing his network." "Good." Thera's scales flickered with determined patterns. "Let him make his move. We'll be ready." But as they watched the assignments for the semifinals appear on the quantum displays, both human and estrine felt their hearts sink. Thera's next opponent would be War Prince Nexus himself. "Well," Kai managed a grim smile, "looks like the final act is coming sooner than we expected." "Any last-minute advice?" Thera asked, trying to keep her scales from betraying her anxiety. "Yeah," Kai's eyes hardened. "Remember what I told you on day one. True strength isn't about having the hardest punch. It's about knowing when and how to use it. You're ready for this, princess. Time to show the Empire what real power looks like." The final test. The arena fell into expectant silence as Thera and War Prince Nexus took their positions for the semifinal match. The quantum blast dome above them darkened automatically as Astria Prime's 3 suns aligned at their zenith, casting the combat zone in dramatic shadows. "A pity it has to end this way, princess," Nexus's voice carried across the arena, his cybernetic enhancements humming with barely contained power. "You've become quite the curiosity with your primitive techniques, but tradition must be preserved." Thera maintained her ready stance, scales pulsing with carefully controlled patterns. "Tradition, War Prince. like the tradition against illegal combat enhancements. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. In the royal box, Emperor Vexen leaned forward, his crystalline crown catching the light. "Serious accusations, daughter," he called out. "Have you evidence of such violations?" "She speaks of things she doesn't understand," Nexus interrupted smoothly. "Perhaps the human's influence has corrupted more than just her combat style." The starting tone rang out before Thera could respond. Nexus moved with frightening speed, his enhanced systems pushing well beyond normal military specifications. But Thera was ready, flowing around his attacks like water around stone. "Your human tricks won't save you this time," Nexus snarled, his cybernetic eye glowing with increasing intensity. "I've analyzed all your patterns, every movement." "That's your problem, Nexus," Thera responded, combining a Wing Chun deflection with an Astrian counterstrike. "You think strength only flows in one direction." Her scales began to pulse with the resonance frequencies they'd practiced, but Nexus merely laughed. "Did you think I wouldn't prepare for your little light show? My systems are shielded now." He launched a devastating combination of strikes, each enhanced limb moving with killing force. Thera avoided direct blocks, using his momentum against him, but she couldn't completely escape. A glancing blow sent her spinning across the arena floor. "The old ways kept us strong," Nexus proclaimed to the crowd as Thera regained her feet. "Alien philosophies and primitive techniques make us weak. The Empire needs a strong leader." That was when Thera noticed something. A subtle flicker in Nexus's movements, an irregularity in his enhanced system's energy signature. She caught Kai's eye from the sidelines and saw her mentor had noticed it too. The War Prince's shield modifications were putting additional strain on his already unstable implants. "Strong?" Thera questioned, beginning a new movement pattern. "Like your enhanced followers. Tell me, how is Commander Vrax recovering from his training accident?" Nexus's cybernetic eye flared. "You dare?" "I dare because I've learned what real strength is," Thera continued, her movements becoming more intricate, generating complex energy patterns. "It's not about having the most powerful enhancements or following the oldest traditions. It's about adaptation, growth, finding new ways to overcome challenges." She launched into the most complicated sequence Kai had taught her, a fusion of Earth martial arts and Astrian bioluminescent signals that made her body appear to flow like liquid light. Nexus's enhanced targeting systems struggled to track her movements. "Pretty lights won't save you," he growled, but his attacks were becoming less coordinated. The strain of maintaining his shields while matching her pace was affecting his systems. "No," Thera agreed, "but this might." She shifted frequencies suddenly, her scales blazing with a new pattern, one specifically calibrated not to overload Nexus's enhancements, but to harmonize with them. The effect was immediate and devastating. Instead of fighting against his cybernetics, her energy patterns enhanced them, pushing their output beyond safe levels. Nexus's superior strength became a liability as his own systems began to cascade out of control. What are you doing?" He staggered, his enhanced limbs moving erratically. "Teaching you something humans learned long ago," Thera answered, maintaining her deadly dance. "Sometimes the strongest steel shatters under its own force." Nexus tried to dial back his enhancements, but it was too late. The resonance cascade had begun. His illegal implants began to glow visible through his armor, their unstable energy signatures now obvious to everyone in the arena. "Stop this," he commanded, but his voice modulator glitched, revealing the artificial undertones of extensive cyber modification. "I am the future of the Empire." "No," Emperor Vexen's voice cut through the chaos. "You are its past." Royal guards moved to surround Nexus, but the War Prince was beyond reason. With a roar of rage and malfunctioning cybernetics, he charged at Thera, bringing all his enhanced power to bear in one final attack. Time seemed to slow. Thera saw the attack coming, saw the desperation and madness in Nexus's remaining organic eye. In that moment, Every lesson Kai had taught her crystallized into perfect clarity. She moved like water, like light, like the fusion of two worlds' wisdom. Nexus' charge met nothing but air as Thera flowed around him, adding her own force to his momentum. The War Prince's enhanced strength became his undoing as he crashed into the arena wall with catastrophic force. When the dust settled, Nexus lay unconscious, his illegal implants sparking and failing. Medical drones swarmed the arena as royal guards secured the fallen warrior. "The evidence you requested, Father." Thera addressed the royal box, her scales now pulsing with calm, steady light. War Prince Nexus and his followers have been using prohibited combat enhancements. Their signatures are now visible to anyone with enhanced vision. Emperor Vexen rose from his throne, his expression stern but his eyes holding a new respect as he gazed at his daughter. "You chose an unusual path to expose this conspiracy, Thera. Some would say an un-Astrian path." "With respect, Father." Thera stood tall, her voice carrying clearly through the arena. "What is truly Astrian? Our strength, our traditions, or our ability to grow, to adapt, to become more than we were. The stars themselves change their patterns, yet we would stagnate in the name of tradition." A murmur of consideration went through the crowd. In the noble boxes, Thera could see younger warriors examining their own enhancement ports thoughtfully. "Well spoken," the Emperor's scales flickered with approval. "Perhaps it is time for the Empire itself to adapt." He turned to address the gathered nobility. "The combat trials are suspended pending a full investigation of illegal enhancements, but I believe we have seen enough to know their true victor." "I had a good teacher," Thera replied, letting her scales show her gratitude in colors only a trained eye could read. "Though I think both student and teacher learned something new." "That's the real secret," Kai nodded. "True strength isn't about being unchanging like a mountain. It's about being adaptable like water, always finding new paths forward." Above them, the quantum blast dome cleared, letting the light of three suns illuminate the arena once more. Thera stood in that light, her scales shimmering with both Astrian power and human wisdom, living proof that the greatest strength comes not from refusing to change, but from having the courage to become something new. In the days that followed, as the Empire began its own journey of adaptation and growth, many would remember this moment, when a princess once called weak showed that true power comes in many forms, and that the future belongs to those brave enough to embrace it.